said, I want to write a book? I bet many of you have. And today's episode is going to be really valuable because I am actually interviewing my editor, my book coach, my designer, all of that, Michelle Rayburn out of Mission and Media. She helped bring my latest book, Social Media for Schools, to life. And we're going to talk about the process. Michelle's really going to talk about how she got into writing, which spoiler alert, she did not start out as a writer. She's going to define, what were the first steps in identifying, what the book was going to look like and who it was for and all of that. She's going to share a lot of tips on what you should look out for, especially if you're self-publishing, because this was a self-published book, but it did not look like it. It does not look like it. It's beautiful. You can kind of tell in some cases that books are self-published. And we're going to really dive into some of the fears that you may have in thinking about writing a book. And so I'm really excited. I think you're going to get a lot out of today's interview. And just a little note about the book, is doing very well. Thank you so much for everybody who's already made their purchase. It's available now on my website, socialschool4edu.com. But I just wanted to share one of the early reviews from Janine Sorensen, digital marketing manager at the Bear Creek School in the state of Washington. Janine writes, Andrea's book is really amazing for anyone managing social media at their school. She distills just about everything you need to know to be impactful on social media into easily digestible chapters with highly organized links to so many additional resources. I have been managing social media at our private school for nearly 5 years and came away with many ideas to effectively refine what I'm doing and ways to do my job more efficiently. Thank you so much, Janine. Many of my missions accomplished. The goals of this book, as far as, helping give digestible chapters. And then we do have a lot of supportive linked documents, linked resources, in addition to a free workbook. Grab the free workbook on my website, socialschool4edu.com/book. Now let's get to this week's K-12 PR tip. All right. This week's K-12 PR tip is maybe not specific to social media, but it's specific to the topic that we're talking about. And it talks about leveraging your network and leveraging the people that you know. Many things seem scary to me. You might not believe that because it's like, hey, let's try this or let's do this. But things are still scary to me. But there are other people that have experience in the things that you might not know as much about. So we really, when we have those fearful moments, when we need help, let's look into the people that you are connected with who might know something about it that can help us. You guys, I bet you love to help someone when they ask you for help, right? Other people really enjoy when they can help you out with something. So leverage your network. It might be people you know. This might be like in my case, my daughter's piano teacher, right? It may be a neighbor. It may be somebody that you work with. It may be somebody in an organization that you're part of, like your state SPRA chapter or the NSPRA organization. I have met so many amazing people over the years, and that's why I've learned so much and gathered so much information about something that I'm passionate about, which is social media for schools. But we've got to look around and see who's in our life that can help us with that. So that's my challenge, and my little tip for you today is there someone in your life that could help you with something that you need help with, whether that's writing, whether that's social media, whether it's writing a book. All right. Now let's get to today's interview with Michelle Rayburn. Welcome to the show, Michelle Rayburn. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Andrea.
This is going to be exciting because, Michelle, a lot of people that are listening know my guests, but you are like brand new, and you're a neighbor. You are my daughter's piano teacher. You're the mom of my daughter's English teacher. I mean, this is a big connection. So why don't you share a little bit about your background and your work in mission and media?
Yeah, so Mission and Media is a business I started for my freelance work, and I really wanted to encapsulate the idea that I help people with content and writing, but I also work with people who have a mission or a purpose that is like to make some kind of a difference in the world. So I really wanted to combine those two things when I was striking out as a freelancer. And so it was a way of combining my heart for having an ulterior purpose in the things we do, like for you, influencing people in schools, and for me, working with people who love words, and then also helping people make their dreams come true with that media, whether that's a cover or whether it's the interior of a book or something like that. So it blends the best of two worlds for me.
Yeah. And how did you get started in this freelance world? Because you, like me, I started out in chemistry. I think you started out in something other than writing as well. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
It's kind of a weird journey because when someone asks you what you want to be when you're in high school, it's so different from where you end up. So I started out getting a Bachelor of Science in nursing and worked in a cardiac unit until I had my kids and decided to stay home for a little while. And during that time, I started asking myself what I really wanted to be when I grew up. And I realized it wasn't nursing, even though you can be good at something and you can like it, but you might not be as passionate as you thought you were about it when you were 18 years old and going into college. So I started to look at how can I make some money working from home while my kids are in school. And you mentioned piano teaching. That was a way for me to add some income to our family in that phase where I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I went to work for a marketing agency for a couple of years and loved the people that I worked with. I even did some collaboration with you during that time, but I also had this desire in my heart to really be my own boss and to have it be really focused and not be doing a little of this and a little of that, but have it really be related to writing. So that's how I ended up in this place. The writing journey for myself goes back about 20 years when I went to a writers conference and I didn't even know why I was going. I went because I thought I wanted to write. And at that moment, I wanted to write articles. I had no idea that it would lead to books. I just always like to write. You know, the person who gets the term paper assignment and you go, I love this assignment, while the rest of your classmates are going, I hate writing assignments.
Yeah. Oh, that is such a great story. And just the fact that, like, we can reevaluate what we want to be when we grow up
Mhm.
whenever we want.
Yeah.
And you are really, really gifted at what you do.
Thank
And we're going
you.
to kind of explore that in my process of
Yeah.
writing this book. But you did mention you are an author, not of just a book. You have authored several books. What really sparked that desire to write, not just one, but several books?
I mentioned that I had started out wanting to write articles, and I always said, I don't have a book in me. I'm never going to write a book. It's funny how when we say never or make those assumptions, it's probably there's a secret desire in there. I was doing a lot of speaking for women's groups, especially at churches, and I realized I wanted to be able to send a message home with them somehow. And not just have it be 45 minutes where I'm there with them, kind of like you with everything you do with schools. It's not just the webinar, it's beyond that. So for me, I put some of the messages that I was including in my talks into book format, and that's how the first one was born. And then you probably are discovering that once you have one, it's sort of addicting. Like, I just want to write another one. What's the next one? So there's a million ideas swimming around up there.
Yeah, and especially when you know how to do it, because the whole process is really overwhelming, and it was overwhelming to me, but we're going to
Yeah.
talk about that. So when I knew that I wanted to write a book and was like, okay, I'm really going to make this happen, you were the first person I called because I
I
knew
love that.
you. You literally live like 10 minutes from my house, and we've got some connections. Actually, both
Yeah.
of both of Michelle's sons are teachers, awesome teachers in
Yeah.
New
Thank you.
Auburn, with the English program, and then our tech ed program. They're doing big things there. But if you could just share with the listeners, like the starting process of assembling my book. I called you and I'm like,
Yeah.
Michelle, I want to write a book. And you're like, okay, what were some of those first steps?
Yeah, one of the first things I wanted to do was meet with you to learn more about who the book was for. It's like with anything you do, whether it's posting on social media or writing a blog post or speaking to a group of people, you want to know who it's for. And so I wanted to learn more about your audience. And then also I wanted to know, what do you want to accomplish with this book? Some books are for entertainment. Some of them are telling like a story, a memoir, that kind of thing. Some are instructional. So I wanted to know, what is this for? And then I also wanted to know how you would do it in a unique way. What is unique about your message? Because there are a really small handful of books out there on social media for schools. So you didn't have that conflict that some authors have where there's thousands of books out there already about their topic, but you still want to look at, how do I approach this in a unique way? Because there are people who you really respect who have already written about a topic. How do I bring something new to the table with this? So before we even talked about mechanics of writing, we talked about where you were going with it and who it was for. And I can go into more detail then about the writing process if you would like to.
Well, yeah, because to me, it was just, I mean, goodness gracious, this book ended up to be, you kept saying like, this is getting a little bit long. The way that you help format it, I mean, we're going to get into that too, but I think
I have
altogether
mine
it's,
here too. I had it so we could wave it around.
oh yes. So it's almost 300 pages, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really full of great ideas. But you know, the reason why I also wanted to write this book when we went through all of those things is like, I can only do so much in a webinar. Just like you
Yeah.
said, when you speak, I can only teach them so much. And I have been writing about social media and schools and what works and what doesn't for years and years and years, since I started in 2014. So I basically had, 8 years when we started. Now we got
Yeah.
9 years of experience, but I wanted to bring that into a book. But to me, that was really overwhelming, because it's like, how do I organize it in a way? So what was that process like?
Yeah. Yeah. So first I wanted to know what content you already had, because you had so many blog posts, so many podcast interviews, webinars, you had all this stuff out there. So there are some people who start out without anything other than, they've taught a seminar with some notes, but you had enough for 8 books out there. So it was like, what do you already have? For some people, it's their journals. There's so many different sources they might have. And then I wanted to know what topics you wanted to cover specifically in the book. So from all the things that you have, what of these topics are the key ones? And we just brainstormed, put a lot of those down, and then you narrowed it down to what you really wanted it. And we weren't even thinking about titles of chapters or anything like that. We were just thinking about topics that you wanted to cover. And then we needed to talk about, how do you want to present this? And one of your passions was to have case studies and examples from other people, not just your testimonials, but others. So we had to talk about, how do we package that in a way that this case study comes into play? How do we start every chapter with something that tells people, you've got this, because that's your passion, you can do this. And so we came up with this format of like, every chapter is going to start with an empowering statement and a testimonial and a case study. And then we talked about, how do we package some of that extra material? And when you have that, then you start to pull that content that's out there into that format. You think, okay, Andrea, you sent me links to all kinds of things. Like, here's a podcast that covers this topic. Here's a blog post that covers this. So it becomes a framework for how to organize all of that content that's out there. And yes, it looks overwhelming, but English teachers had it right when they made us outline stuff. I hated outlining. I still love to write by the seat of my pants. I love it. It's just so fun to like figure out where the story's going to go. Even in nonfiction, like, where's this going to go? But when you're writing for an audience like yours, you have to know what is going to be the structure, and the outline becomes the real framework for that delivery package.
Yeah, and it came together so well. And this is a self-published book, but how many books do you think you've either self-published yourself or helped other people publish?
I have to look up on my shelf there. There's at least 20 on my shelf right now, but
Okay.
that's just the ones that I've designed and done interiors on. And then I've helped a lot of people with editing or coaching and that kind of thing. But there's at least 20 of them that I've done from, and that's like the authors. Most of the authors are bringing their content to me. They've gone through years of writers conferences and but not everyone is in that place. So that's where yours was a little different in that I was your book coach, but also that organizer of content. Some
Right.
people have no content and they hire somebody to do ghostwriting, and that person is really creating content from scratch. I did not do that. These were all of your words just repackaged in a way that brought it all into one under a book cover.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And you even designed the cover. And if you guys look at it, I mean, somebody was just giving me a hard time about the purple because they're thinking about the Minnesota Vikings, but it's just my business colors. But you really embodied what my current graphic designer uses. And so you got the best compliment, Michelle, when Allison, my graphic designer, is like, oh, it looks like I designed it.
I loved it when you told me that. That's so great. That
Yeah.
is important that the author's brand is brought into consideration. Not everyone has a brand, but when you do have one, it needs to look like your other materials. But then there's some book design concepts that come into that. For example, when you're putting together a book cover, you have to shrink that image way down to a postage stamp size to see how it looks in that size as well, because that's how people are making purchasing decisions on online book platforms. And so a really cool book cover is not necessarily going to work if it's very graphically centered, but they can't read the title. In your case, you really needed people to see that it is about social media for schools. When they're scrolling, it makes them stop. So that's where the design comes in with some of the publishing principles as well.
Yeah, and that was so valuable to me to have that expertise because of course I've never done it. So I had
Mhm.
a lot of fears, going into it, and some of them, well, they played out a little bit, but you were always there to talk me off the ledge. So that coaching part did come in. But, some of my listeners might be like, I might have a book in me. What do you
Yeah.
think most people are afraid of when they start a project like this?
Hmm. I think it's overwhelming if it's a field they've never stepped into before. And so sometimes they need to have, like, if it's an author friend or someone who, like you said, can coach you through it. But some people start out by going to a writer's conference because sometimes that fear is like, can I even write? Like I have fantastic ideas and I might be a great speaker, but can I write? And so that a writer's conference or a writing course or something like that sometimes gives that confidence. Like, okay, I can write, and there are editors. There's people out there who can fix some things. And the other thing that's hard is not knowing where to begin. So really having somebody to brainstorm something with you, even if that's all they do is just help you organize it and then you take it and run from there. I think that's where I've met some podcasters who want to take their podcast and turn that into a book, but they don't know where to start.
Okay. Yeah, and I think you really broke it down well when we started our process. Who's this book for? What do
Mhm.
you want to accomplish? And what kind of is unique about, your
Yeah.
perspective. And I said like from the get-go, and that's what I said, what do you hope with this book? I want more stories told. I want more schools to embrace social media for the
Mhm.
positivity that it can do, because there's so many people afraid of it. But if given the right systems and the right methods and the right storytelling,
Mhm.
there are some really positive things. And I think you do a little bit of social media for your church. You even took a couple lessons, right, from it?
I did. Yeah, so I loved it that I was managing our social media at that time. I now have recently handed that off to somebody else, but we were starting sort of from scratch. Somebody had started a Facebook page, but nobody was really managing it. And I was in a meeting and I went, wait a second. I'm working on a book project that covers some of these principles right now. So I said, we need to have one email under the church's domain name that everybody who needs to send something to. So we use that advice from you and set that up. And then we looked at some policies and looked at some of the safety and not that I stole anything from you, but I definitely used your guides. Like,
Yeah.
I looked at some of the resources you have out there on your website and said, we could use this for an example for writing a policy.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And by the way, I want to help as many people as I can. So whether it's all K-12 schools or it extends beyond that, that made me really happy because
Yeah.
sometimes it's the systems and policies that get in the way. That's why we cover it in the
Right.
first section of the book, and then we kind of maybe
Yeah.
get into some more of the fun stuff. But if you don't have things set up at the beginning, it's just not going to work. Um, so there's a lot of details that go in. This is available in Kindle edition as well.
Mhm.
There's a lot of design elements that you brought to this book. I think one of my biggest fears, Michelle, in writing a book was I really wanted it to be good. I needed it to be a great resource that was going to help people that I'd be proud of. And I was just worried that, given a project this big, that I wouldn't be able to. But it is beautiful. I don't think if anybody
Mm.
opened this book, they would ever think this was self-published. And so
That's my goal.
what are some of those things that you need to maybe keep in mind? I know you already went through a few, like the thumbnail of the
Cover,
image,
sure.
making sure that people can read that when it's super duper small. What are just a few other things that you got to keep in mind?
Well, one of my goals, and I love that I accomplished that goal with you, is to create either whether it's my own book or somebody else's, that it can stand on a bookshelf in a bookstore and nobody would be able to point it out and say that one was done by the author herself. It really needs to stand up in the market. And yes, anybody can write a book and go on KDP and publish it, but it's worth spending a little bit of money to get it to look like the other books. And one of the things is in Word, it's really hard to set up those running headers that are in a book. If you notice that most of the books you buy at the bookstore have the book title on one side of the top of the page and the chapter title on the other. Yes, some of that can be done in Word, but it's really hard to do that. It's also really hard in Word to get the spacing between lines right. So, yes, you can change the font size and the spacing, but in a professional program like Adobe InDesign, you can get that to look very professional on how that looks. So when you pick up a self-published book, sometimes you'll notice that the text is all squished together in single spacing and the author hasn't taken the time to give a little bit of space between that, or they try to pack as much as they can on a page because they're trying to keep that page count down. Yes, I know it costs a little bit more to publish a book that has 300 pages. We could have crammed it into 250, but it would be hard for that person to read. The other thing that really sets apart well done books is you'll see they have footnotes. If you pick up a book and there are zero footnotes, and this was a mistake I made as an early on author, was I didn't really track my sources very well. And so I know that some of the concepts and ideas weren't all my own. They were morphed from other things. So as I work now, I keep track of like what blog post did I pull that line from? I create a footnote. I might delete it later. I might not need it, but I really keep track of where it all came from. And you'll see that if you pick up any business book out there, there's a ton of footnotes in the back because we don't
Yeah.
have all that stuff living in our brains. We know we got it from somewhere. The other thing is registering an ISBN number and a publisher name and not just using the free things that Amazon or Ingram or some of those offer. When you register that and you have your own publisher name, it creates a public record for that book. And so it appears on searches that it wouldn't if you were just using the free ISBN number. So there are things like that I can pick up a book and go, I know this is self-published, or I have to dig further because they did such a great job of it. I need to find out, what is this publisher? Who is this? So
Yeah.
it's just, I could really geek out on all of that stuff. I don't want to overwhelm your audience with all of it.
Well, basically, they just know now who to call. And so we've got Michelle's contact information in the show notes. She is very picky. I don't know if at
Yeah.
any point you regretted saying yes to me. I hope you didn't,
I
Michelle.
did not. I
Um,
did not.
but
You are
but
a joy to work with.
yeah, but it was just such a fun process. And especially because we could meet in person sometimes, not
That
always
that
over
makes it
Zoom.
so much easier. Yes.
Yeah, but definitely if you have a story on your heart that you know is going to accomplish a mission, Michelle might be the right person, and she's very busy. She's got a lot of work. But I would definitely reach out to her if you'd like some help, because she is definitely an expert, and I'm just
Thank
so
you.
proud of this book. So as of today, the book has been out almost a month, and we've sold well over 800 books. Some of them through a bulk order, because some of, like, one school, Michelle, they ordered 85, one school district
I
in
love
Texas.
that.
They ordered 85 books, and then I don't know if I told you, but they ordered 150 more.
Oh
So
my
they're
goodness.
they're doing a book study with all of their leadership team this summer on the book. And so I'm
Wow.
super excited. So are you surprised with the success of the sales of the books? I guess I feel like it's done well. It's been number one in several of the categories.
Yeah, it's
Um,
been, yeah. I'm not surprised, Andrea, and here's why. I knew from the beginning you had a good concept, and I knew there was a need for what you were doing, and I knew that there weren't that many other books out there, and for sure none that were published within the last year. So I knew that there was a need for it. What is unique is that your book has sold way better than the average self-published book. The average self-published book, I don't even know the exact number, but I've heard people toss around like 200 in the lifetime of the book. You write a memoir, 200 people buy it, that's the end of it. This is not a memoir. And so I knew that you had potential to have a huge reach on it, and there's a need. So when you have a good concept, a book can sell very well. And I was on Amazon every morning, just refreshing the page to see how it was doing, just because I wanted to know. And then it was like a number one in this category, and that category, and another one. I'm like, yay, go Andrea.
Yeah, that was exciting. And that's because a lot of the listeners to this show, and the great people across the country, and
Yeah.
also because, like we said, this book features so many stories, which was
Mhm.
overwhelming to me because I don't know how to work footnotes. Again, I was a chemistry major. We even had a really interesting discussion talking about how we were going to write this book, whether it be AP style or whatever.
Style guidelines.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so we've got a special editorial note that you can read on the inside of the book, but it's like social media is not AP style, right? So there's a little bit of a mixture. So I'm hoping that none of you are cringing while you read the book, but I did preface it on that on the copyright page, I guess.
Yeah. Your audience knows what those style guides are because of being in communications, but a lot of people don't know that there are specific grammar rules and capitalization rules for newsprint or web versus book or people studying for a science degree in college. So will you pick one and you stick with it, or as a publisher, you get to make your own style guide and make some exceptions. And that's the beauty of getting to do your own work, is you get to make some decisions. There were a few times where you took things to your audience to get some input, but then you had to make a decision. And I said, you get to do this. That's the freedom. You get to choose.
Yes, it's always a dilemma. And when you're involved in social media, everything's always out there. So as we wrap up, Michelle, whether it be related to a book or not, this is the Mastering Social Media for Schools
Mhm.
podcast. So what would be your best social media tip?
I'm going to tie this in with the work I do as an editor. Use something like Grammarly. It it's so awful to scroll through social media posts and know that some of the things you see could have been fixed by quickly pasting it into Grammarly, or having that installed on your browser. I have cringed at my own social media posts and wondering, why didn't I pop it in there? That would have been so much better than reading that thing I put out there. And you can take it back by editing on Facebook, but I get so, like, I can't edit something once it's out there on some of the other platforms, and I have to just leave it there. So use one of those tools.
Yeah, even from an editor, she's giving you that advice. And so certainly you as a school communicator, or assistant or a media specialist, we've got busy jobs. Use that Grammarly. I love that. So,
Mhm.
Michelle, what's the best way for my listeners to get connected with you?
I'd say the best way is through my website, missionandmedia.com, because on there I have a free assessment they can take that it's kind of like a little quiz asking some questions to determine if self-publishing is a good avenue for them. It isn't for everybody. Sometimes people need to just go with a company that does it all for them. They don't want to mess with some of the decisions you had to make behind the scenes. And so I have that on there. And then I have my social channels on there too.
Okay, awesome. Well, I really recommend that you get connected. I did say I was never going to write a book again. And then as soon as I held it in my hand, I start like on the airplane to vacation because I got it literally the day before we flew out. I'm starting to like outline my next book, and it is a little bit addicting, right?
I know you used the analogy that I've used before and many authors have as well, that it's like having a baby. While you're in labor, you say, I'm never having another baby. And then you hold the baby in your arms and you're like, oh, when can I have another one?
Right, exactly. And before we leave, Michelle, tell us a couple of your books that are out there. I know they'll be able to get them on your website as well, but what was your first book?
The first book was The Repurposed and Upcycled Life,
Okay.
looking at how some of our biggest struggles in life can also be opportunities to grow. And it was born out of my love for trash to treasure decorating people can see behind me when they're watching the video that I like to repurpose things. So that was the first one. And then I have one for couples called Classic Marriage. And my husband got involved in that one, writing some of our story. So those are two of my favorites.
And Michelle is an excellent writer, and
Thank you.
she got you just mix in, I mean, great stories, but with like humor. It's really good stuff. So take a look at that, and congratulations on all your success. And you have a
Thank
podcast,
you.
Michelle.
I do. It's called Life Repurposed.
There we go. So, Life Repurposed, I actually am going to be talking a little bit about my story and how I was able to repurpose my life, which I talk about a little bit in the book as well. But
Yes, I'm looking forward to having you on there.
yeah, very much so. Well, thanks so much for hanging out with us today, you guys. Thanks for listening. I hope we just thought this would be interesting for you guys to kind of learn like what goes into writing a book. I didn't know when I started.
Yeah.
I learned so much. And if you want to know more, you can certainly reach out to Michelle or me and ask some
Yeah.
questions. I know that a lot of you have stories in you that need to get out. You can do it. If I can do it, you can definitely do it. And Michelle will make it much easier. So thank you so much, Michelle.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.